tongues are still wagging in disbelief about the level of terror that security forces unleashed during the March 13th Kawempe North by-election, which left scores of journalists and politicians nursing injuries. As does Seto's Israel Mayengo, a founding member of the defunct Uganda Patriotic Movement, for which the current head of state, Museveni, was the president, has weighed in on the conduct of the elections with a historical perspective. Mayengo says that the Kawempe North by-election is reminiscent of all the previous elections, now marred with irregularities.
No election in Uganda so far has passed without some kind of irregularities. So even in 1996, there are some doubts as to whether it was properly carried out or not.
Mayengo acknowledges that it would have been a miracle for Uganda Patriotic Movement, for which he was a short-lived deputy president for Uganda, to win the elections.
When we arrived at Parliament at 2 o'clock, we were informed that our friends had met 4 hours earlier, 10 o'clock in the morning, and decided that the elections would be in political parties. It was at that moment that we decided that we could not cope with these people who were seasoned politicians at that time. We were youngish ourselves. We decided to get to the City Hall and form a political party of our own. We formed the Uganda Patriotic Movement.
There are two solid grounds on which the argument is based: that both the Uganda People's Congress and the Democratic Party were more prominent than both the Conservative Party and the Uganda Patriotic Movement, which had just been formed ahead of the 1980 polls.
The elections were then organized, and we had 6 months to campaign. We, as a young party, the Uganda Patriotic Movement, almost knew for certainty that we did not stand a chance of winning this election. The election took place in December. At that time, UPM was very, very little known in Uganda, to the extent that many constituencies did not have a UPM candidate.
Also, the chairman of the 6-member military commission, Paulo Muwanga, undermined the outcome of the elections.
Here comes the twist. Paulo Muwanga, who was chairman of the military commission, announced, I do not know whether he consulted his colleagues, of whom President Museveni was his vice. I do not know whether he ever consulted with him, but he announced that only he had the authority to announce the results of the elections. And indeed he did. There were a lot of irregularities.
Milton Obote bounced back to the presidency following the outcome of the election, having obtained the highest number of MPs, who subsequently chose the president. Mayengo declines to comment on whether the 1980 election was used by President Museveni as an excuse to launch the 5-year guerrilla war in 1981 on grounds of having had prior plans.
There are a lot of things in these moves which are not put in public at the beginning. Nobody could easily say it clearly, that if we lose, we'll go to the bush. Now, how could you say such a thing publicly?
Mayengo rules out that there should be doubts that the government was responsible for the violence in the Kawempe North by-election.
Those who were beating the people were not ordinary people. They were soldiers and probably policemen and others with authority, but in ordinary clothes. Now, those are the ones who caused the chaos. Now, the question is, who controlled them? The government or the opposition? I don't think that anyone would answer differently.
He argues that the military is being used to overstep its mandate.
The question is, what was the army doing in the elections? The duty of the army is to defend the country against aggressors from outside, but not against its own citizens. The police would have been there, adequate, and I hope that eventually it will be the police that will be stronger in acting, in restoring order within the country than the army. At the moment we're giving the army a duty which doesn't belong to it constitutionally, even by common sense.
Nevertheless, Mayengo argues that it should have been expected that that President Museveni would not admit that his party rigged the elections despite the violence unleashed by the government forces.
Now, what is curious, I have heard that the party would contest, would go to court about the election. Under normal circumstances, it's the person who stood and was defeated that would go to court, that he was cheated. But this time, are you saying that the president is saying that he was cheated? He never stood for elections in Kawempe.
Jackson Onyango, NTV.